Nikolas Cruz has pleaded guilty to the deadly 2018 shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Cruz killed 17 people, including 14 students and 3 staff members, during a 7-minute rampage through the school. He was expelled a year before the shooting because of his history of threatening and sometimes violent behavior. In court yesterday, Cruz admitted to first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder charges. The next phase is a penalty phase trial where 12 jurors will decide whether he will spend his life in prison without parole or get the death penalty. Cruz addressed the courtroom during the hearing yesterday. It was a rambling address to the courtroom. We want to play a little bit of what he had to say.
I'm doing this for you, and I do not care if you do not believe me. And I love you, and I know you don't believe me, but I have to live with this every day.
I want to bring in Tony Montalto. He is the president of Stand with Parkland and the father of 14-year-old Gina Montalto, who was killed in the shooting. Tony was in the courtroom when Cruz pleaded guilty yesterday. Tony, thank you for being with us once again. Of course, we have talked about this and we've talked about Gina. We're so sorry for your loss. And Anne-Marie and I were, as we were watching the proceedings yesterday, we're talking to each other, and we just wondered, our hearts went out to you and the other families and relatives in that courtroom, having to listen and to relive those moments, those final moments of Gina and her classmates and teachers. What was that like? What was going through your mind and through the mind of your family?
Well, it was a very difficult day to be in the same room with the murderer of my daughter. As the state attorney went through the list and the actions of the confessed killer, it was very painful to hear for all the families what happened to our children or our spouses. He's clearly a very dangerous and violent young man, and we need to work to make sure he's prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Every time we talk to you, I'm always struck by how incredibly strong you present. And you were gracious enough to allow us to come into your home and talk to you and show us pictures of your daughter. And when I watched you yesterday in the courthouse, it was a reminder that you carry this incredible pain with you, even though you often don't display it. And you were asked kind of immediately after the court appearance to kind of react to Nikolas Cruz's statement. I'm going to play a little of what you said, and then we can talk about it.
What was the most difficult part of today's hearing to hear for you?
I think the absolutely ridiculous statement from the defendant.
What did you find ridiculous, most ridiculous about it?
He's doing it for our families. If you wanted to do something for our families, you shouldn't have killed our loved ones.
I too did not know what to make of that statement. He was clearly sort of insistent on saying it, but then it didn't seem like it had been well thought out in any way. But the whole time I was listening to him, even as he was apologizing, I thought, well, what could he say? What could he say that would offer any kind of relief to these families? And so I ask you that. Is there anything he could have said that would have made any difference to you?
Short answer is no. There's nothing he could say. He's already done damage, irreparable damage, to my family and to the other families. We need him, again, to be punished to the full extent of the law. As a society, we should all want that. We need to find a way to discourage others from following and copying these heinous attacks. We need to find a way to minimize the notoriety of the perpetrators of these things so that others don't want to follow them. And finally, we need to remember the victims. Always remember the victims, not just as a number, not just as a still photograph, but as the wonderful, vibrant individuals that they were. My daughter, Gina, was a light of our lives. She was our firstborn. She made us parents. And every day we miss her so very, very much.
It is absolutely heartbreaking to hear you say that. And I know, Tony, you've said it to us and you've said it to others ever since Gina was killed. But again, every time you say that, it just hits me right in the heart. So you say you want the shooter, the defendant, to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. What would that look like to you? There's the question of whether he should be sentenced to life in prison without a possibility of parole, or whether he should face the death penalty. What would you and your family members want to see in this case?
I would like to see him given every opportunity that he gave Gina and the others on February 14th. That's what he deserves. Nothing more and nothing less.
Tony, I'm curious, is this the first time that you've been in the same room with him?
It was the first time that I was in the same room with him, as it was for most families. It was very difficult for my wife and I. As I look back, I'll say that it was the second most difficult thing that we ever did. The first most difficult thing was when we had to hold our beautiful daughter's lifeless body. Again, that this violent individual who admitted to killing 17 people and to wanting to kill even more. And we also heard how he went back and not only initially shot people, but how he went back and shot some of them 2 or 3 times. This was no break. This was a planned, calculated act by a violent individual.
I tell you, I recall seeing video when he had been first arrested, but this was probably the first time that I'd sort of heard him talk. And I was initially struck by how diminutive he looked and how young he looked. And then going through what happened that day was a reminder that, that you never really know, or you cannot sort of determine that someone looks like an evil person or a bad person or whatever. There was such a strong contrast to me between how he looked and the awful, awful acts that were done on that day. And I wondered if you were also struck in that same way.
Actually, no. The idea that they dress him in clothes that are too big, that they stand him next to an attorney who is a very large man, and the fact that he's hunched over and diminutive is all just a little bit of theater to elicit compassion for this cold and calculating killer. He had no remorse in his statement yesterday. We need to be clear on this. He planned this. There's videos that were exposed during the commission that investigated this. There's videos that'll be shown during the penalty phase of the trial that show he clearly planned this. This is why it's so important, and the fact that you say you can't identify somebody by looks. This is why it's so important to have behavioral threat assessments, to look at how somebody acts and then get them the help they need before they resort to violence. That's one thing we truly believe in. We've toured the nation with the Secret Service's National Threat Assessment Center to train over 5,000 school professionals, law enforcement professionals, and mental health experts on just that need. Remember, this shooter had over 40 interactions with the police prior to his actions here. This is why red flag laws or extreme risk protection orders that have been proposed by the Biden administration, that were also supported by the Trump administration. These laws, which look at somebody's actions, and if they're deemed to be a threat to themselves or others, their firearms are removed so they can get the help they need. How is it that both our last president, a Republican, our current president, a Democrat, supports this idea, yet we don't see any action on it from Congress? It's absolutely shameful, and lives are lost every day by Congress not acting to create red flag laws or provide incentives to states to put more in. In the wake of our tragedy, we've seen 15 states plus the District of Columbia add these laws. Here in Florida, it was passed, sadly, after the loss of our loved ones. Yet, in the first 2 years, it was used 3,500 times to save lives. That's what we need to do. We need to be proactive in this.
And you have been, Tony, in your role as the founder and president of the Stand With Parkland, the organization committed to doing exactly what you just said, advocating for public safety reforms in schools. Tony, I cannot, and I know this is probably purposeful, every time I look at you and I address you, my eyes are drawn to the beautiful picture of Gina behind you, and I know you did that on purpose so that you would remind the world who Gina was and her beautiful smile. Can you just remind our audience who Gina was, how you want the world to think of her, how you want her to be remembered by people who did not know her but can see her beautiful smile over your shoulder there?
My daughter, Gina, was a bright and bubbly kid. She was the light of our lives. She was an excellent student. She was a member of the school color guard team and the marching band that performed. They were state champions in 2017. She really volunteered for groups in our church. She volunteered at groups that help kids with differing abilities. Already in her short life, she was more of a bright light than the shooter. She was just a wonderful kid. She loved to read. She loved art, and she loved her little brother. She was the world is a poor place without our beautiful daughter, Gina.
And Tony, just to the point that you just made there, how are you doing? How is Gina's brother doing? How is your wife doing? How are your family members all doing? It's got to be incredibly hard, and I know that the pain will never go away, but just on a day-to-day basis, I mean, what are your days like?
Well, there's some days are better than others, but they're all tinged with sadness because of the loss of Gina. We have to find a way to live with the pain while still functioning in life. And again, some days are better than others. That's all the families. There's just no easy way around this kind of thing. Yesterday, of course, was an extremely difficult day as we had to relive the tragedy of losing Gina. But this is why it's so important for all Americans to come together and start being part of the solution, to demand action from our elected leaders, to be aware of what's going on in your child's school. To do that at standwithparkland.org, we have 5 questions every family should ask. These are questions that we came up with after our tragedy and after consulting with experts to find a way for families to begin a conversation on school safety, because it's just so important for parents to be involved. And, again, this is not an issue that should be dividing us. School safety, the love of our children, is not political. Both Democrats and Republicans love their children, and we need to start recognizing what we agree on more than concentrating on the things that divide us. We see that just too many times, that people don't remember that we are the United States of America, and we need to come together and work on what we agree on. Let's get that into law. Let's get that into policy. And then we can come back again and concentrate on how to separate our differences.
Listen, Tony, amen to that. Tony Montalto, every time you come on, I really do feel like there is somebody out there that's going to hear your message, that's going to go to that website, that's going to, see a red flag and intervene. You are doing life-saving work, and I know it's hard, and we really appreciate you spending time with us. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having us. And again, standwithparkland.org and our resources page have a multitude of things that will help everyone to know what to do when they see something. And we have already actually saved lives. We get some people that have contacted us, and we put them in touch with law enforcement or with people who can help them. And that's our goal, again, to help people before they resort to violence.
Tony, thank you.